everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sally and this is Secret Life of a Seamstress, my channel where I talk all about sewing and knitting and crafting and making a handmade wardrobe. Thanks so much for joining me again today if you are a regular viewer, and if you are new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me today. So today's video is going to be a bit of a different one. It's just going to be a bit of a chat. So for a while now I've been thinking about doing another Q&A type video. I did one a couple of years ago, but since then my channel has grown quite a lot and there are quite a lot of new faces and subscribers to my channel, so I thought it was about time that I recorded a kind of proper intro, a little bit more about my sewing journey, and also on here and over on Instagram I was getting quite a few questions about sewing and also about YouTube and freelance work and things like that, so I thought I would just bundle them all together in a Q&A video and just make it a bit of a chatty one. So I feel a little bit nervous about today's video. It's never really easy to talk about yourself, is it? But I always kind of had it in my head that when I got to 10,000 subscribers on here, I would do this kind of video as a reward. No, not as a reward at all, but actually just as a focus point where I could say, right, when I get to that point then I'll do another Q&A. So as I say, I put out a call on my community tab here on YouTube and also one of those little question box things that you can do on Instagram, and thank you so much to everyone that did send me an official question. I've bundled them all together and I'm just going to go through them today in a kind of order as much as I can, but then I thought I'd also kind of chat a little bit along the way about anything else that comes up. So I hope today's video will be enjoyable and it will be okay. It'll probably be a bit random, but that's okay. So just before I get started, I'll quickly share with you what I'm wearing. Today I'm wearing one of my Ogden camis in a lovely Atelier Brunette viscose dobby fabric, and I just have it on with a ready-to-wear cardigan that I recently bought from Boden in the sale. So I've been looking for a cardigan this colour for quite some time, and in my head I was planning to knit one, but I think I've had to realise that I actually can't knit and sew and make all of the things and I really wanted a cardigan that was a kind of neutral colour that would go with everything, handmade dresses, handmade tops like this one and things like that. And this lovely cardigan came up in the sale on Boden and I snapped it up. It's got really pretty buttons on it actually. Hopefully you can see if I come a little bit nearer. It's got some really lovely sparkly buttons and it's in a sort of a wool fabric. So yeah, it's just lovely and cosy and warm and perfect to pair with things like this. So that's what I'm wearing today. So I'm just going to get straight into the questions, and I do have them written out on my computer just so that I can remember names and things like that and the questions that were asked. So first of all I thought I'd start with sort of sewing background. So I had a few questions about my sewing background and whether I'd ever had any training or anything like that. So I had a question from Nanny Lou 8791. It says, standard question, when did you start sewing and did you take a course? And then another couple sort of along the same lines. One from Cheryl Horton at 3719. It says, hi Sally, have you always sewn or is it a skill you've developed since having your children? See Her Sew also asked, how long have you been sewing? And Catherine Mary Hale also asked, how long have you been sewing? So I kind of feel like sewing has always been there for me. I feel as though I've always sewn. It's probably not the case, but at least as far back as I can remember, sewing has always kind of been there for me. I feel like I can remember being quite little, possibly around 8 or 9, and doing the kind of kids sewing that you can get, like tapestries, cross stitches and things like that. Always at Christmas time a lot of my presents would be crafty themed rather than toys, because that's what I always used to love doing at home when I was little. So that kind of sewing has always been in my life. And then as I got older I got really into doing hand sewing, things like cross stitch and things like that. I made a really huge picture. It was a Winnie the Pooh themed picture and it was quite huge. Maybe one day I'll show it to you actually, because I've actually got it upstairs in my cupboard. It's a really big sort of Winnie the Pooh inspired seasonal picture cross stitched, and I'm so proud of it. It was really huge and I finished it. I must have been a teenager I think, and my grandparents had it framed for me, and for ages I had it hanging in my bedroom, I think, at home, and I've got it now in a cupboard upstairs, and I always thought maybe I'd put it in one of my children's bedrooms, but that just hasn't happened because obviously they have their own tastes and their own themes and things like that. But I will always keep it because it has such lovely memories for me. I always remember also doing a little bit of embroidery and things like that. I remember my grandma talking to me about embroidery and giving me a couple of iron-on transfers and talking to me about the stitches and things like that. So sewing has always been there, not necessarily dressmaking, but when I was younger I was much more into knitting really. So I think when I got a bit older I did sort of have a go now and again on my mum's sewing machine at home, but not very often really. I was much more into knitting at that stage, but I did know how to sew and I was taught how to use the sewing machine. I just wasn't that good at it. And then when I got older and got to the stage where I had my own house, I sort of revisited sewing again and thought about things that I could make for my own home and went more down the route of making home furnishings. So I love to make cushions for my own home. When I got my first house I made a lot of cushions. I made a humongous pair of curtains for my living room, which were a task. So things like that really, more sort of homeware and things like that. All of my family really have sewn. So my grandma, my nan was a seamstress as well. She used to sew baby clothes. She worked in an industrial factory sewing baby clothes and things like that. So she always had a sewing machine in her house, a big industrial sewing machine. It's still there actually. And I'd love to have it one day. I just don't think I could actually fit it in my home, which is a shame. And also my mum used to sew as well and make some of her own clothes. So it's always been there in the background for me, and it's always been something that I've just known that I wanted to get more into in the future. So after my daughter was born, I really sort of got interested in sewing again, and YouTube was just kind of coming into its own in a way where sewing is concerned, and there weren't many sewing channels around, but there were a few. And one of the channels that I loved to watch was the Sew Over It channel with Lisa Comfort, when she used to do most of it herself, and she used to post monthly makes videos of everything she made. I'm sure you probably used to watch them as well, like I did. But yeah, it was relatively new and it was really inspiring, and I just remember thinking I would love to do that. I'd love to make my own clothes like that. All of her makes at that time were really my style. I love anything that's vintage inspired, and at the time Sew Over It style was really vintage inspired as well, and I felt as though I just loved everything she made, and I used to watch and re-watch her videos over and over again. And then eventually I just decided to pick dressmaking up again and give it a go and see where I got. At the time, bearing in mind I hadn't really done a lot of dressmaking, I'd just done the home sewing really. I was really wary of buying indie sewing patterns because I just only knew really the big four patterns. They were the only pattern brands that I'd ever tried, and I was a bit scared to venture out and try an indie pattern. But I bought one of Sew Over It patterns, the Sew Over It shift dress, and decided to just give it a go. I made this Sew Over It shift dress, and it wasn't perfect by any means, but I just remember it being something that I thought, actually, I really like this, and I really was proud of it. It was the long sleeved version, and I wore it to a christening actually, my friend's christening, and yeah, I loved it. And then from that point onwards, I just kind of caught the sewing bug and just wanted to make more and more and learn more and more, watch endless YouTube videos of Sew Over It makes. Sew Over It at the time had quite a lot of tutorials on their channel as well, so I used to watch those. And in answer to the question about whether or not I've ever had a course or any training, the answer to that is no. I've just been self-taught really, by watching YouTube videos, by learning from the people in my family, my nan, my grandma and my mum. I did do one course actually, a very basic sewing course where we got to make a pair of pyjamas, but if I'm honest, I knew quite a lot of what was taught to me there. It was basic sort of sewing really, but the one thing I did learn when I was there was how to use an overlocker, and I always thought if I ever got into sewing properly I would want to have an overlocker, because the idea that you could finish your seams in that way and make them look really neat was just amazing to me. And it was one of the things that always used to annoy me about handmade garments, that the seams never looked right and it never really looked nice inside. So that, in a rather rambly, long, large nutshell, is how long I've been sewing, how I got into it, and whether or not I've had any training. So the next sewing related question is from Alexandra Rose Designs, and it says, do you ever sew when you don't feel like it? And I think the answer to that is it depends what kind of don't feel like it. So I think I'm kind of learning to understand myself better in terms of that, because I used to push myself to sew when I really didn't feel like it, and it never turned out well. So I think if you don't feel like it in terms of you just lost a bit of sewing mojo and you need something to just get yourself back into sewing, I think what I tend to do if I feel like that is make something that I'm really familiar with. So for me it's often something like a Jarrah sweatshirt or a Linden sweatshirt, or something that's really quick and easy to sew, or even an Ogden cami like this, and you know that you know the pattern really well, you generally tend to make it really well and it fits you nicely. I think it's really good to have a project like that that you can just whip up, and often I find if I've made something like that, that will be enough to get me back into sewing again, and I'll start to want to make all of the things again. I think I'm learning about myself as well when the best times of day for me are to sew. So if I've ever got a big project to do, it's better for me to do it in the morning because I'm much more focused and much more energetic in the mornings. I think sewing in the evening now just generally doesn't work for me. I think that's changed for me over time though, because obviously at one point I had to sew in the evenings really because my children would be in bed then, so that would be really the only time that I got to sew. Now life is a little bit different for me in terms of the fact that my children are at full-time school, and then in the evenings they don't need me so much, so I do get time to sew now when they are around. So my life is a little bit different to maybe some of you with young children that only have sort of evening time to sew, and I think then yeah, you just have to work out when you feel best and what time of day is best for you. The next question is from Should Have Been Born in the 1930s, and it says, how do you fit in house jobs around sewing? So I think this is always a bit of a difficult one, isn't it? And I think it depends what your day looks like. But in terms of housework, what I tend to do is when I come back from the school run, I've mentioned this before, I dash around the house for about 15 minutes and generally tidy away and make everything look reasonable so that I don't feel stressed. And I'll wash up all the breakfast things and things like that and generally put a wash on. So that's my day to day, and then in the evening I'll kind of do the same. So clear up all the dinner things, make sure that's all done. Make sure everything's reasonably tidy, because I can't sew if there's a big mess and I know that things need to be done. So that's my sort of basic day to day. And then what I like to do is, this might sound a bit sad, but I don't care, is get all my work done in the week by Thursday, so that on Friday I can have Friday as like a cleaning and food shop restock day. And it doesn't always happen. Sometimes I do need to work on a Friday as well, but if I can work that way and have Friday to get sorted out like that, I tend to do all of my housework and clean the whole house on a Friday, go food shopping, and then everything feels really nice for the weekend, and it just makes me feel so calm going into the weekend, and I love that I can do that. And as I say, it doesn't always work. I've tried so many different ways of doing housework. So there's an Instagram page, you might know it, called The Organised Mum, I think it's called, and she's got this cleaning schedule thing where you clean a certain area of your house on a different day of the week. So like Monday might be living room, Tuesday was bedrooms, I think, Wednesday was hallways, and I tried that for a while but it just didn't work for me because I don't feel like the house is done. I like the house to be done in a whole day when it's all done all at the same time, and then at the end of it you just feel like everything's really nice and clean, but that might just be me. But yeah, if you are struggling to fit housework and sewing in and you do have young children at home, I think that is a really good method actually, because you feel as though you're doing something every single day, but after you've done your half an hour, your day is free then to do whatever else you need to do. So I'll link that below if you are interested in that. But yeah, it is always a balance, and I'm just still trying to work all of that out really, but that's my way I work at the moment. So moving on to sort of sewing and work type questions. I had a question from Hobbity Hedaho, hope I'm saying that right, 2581. Hope you don't mind this question being too nosy. I'd love to know more about sewing for a job. As you mentioned, that is what you do now. How did you get to where you are and how does that work? How did you grow your channel? It seems like a lot of planning and organising goes into having a YouTube channel. So in terms of sewing as a job, but what I do now is obviously have YouTube, which is work. I do feel like YouTube is work now. I am doing it regularly and it is a source of income, which is amazing, and I'm so grateful all the time that that can be part of my work now. Other things I do is work freelance writing for a couple of companies and also producing freelance video as well. So although I post video here on YouTube, I also work freelance creating video for other companies as well. You'll also have seen here on YouTube now that I've started to partner with a couple of brands, which has also been amazing, and something that I never really thought I would get to do. Working with Small has been really lovely, and also working with Readly and Serious Readers as well. So in terms of how I kind of got into those things, I don't really know. It did kind of just happen. In terms of my freelance writing, I've got into most of those things via people actually finding my YouTube channel. But the other way you can get into things is actually by being aware of call-outs as well. So for some of my writing work, I've seen call-outs from pattern companies and things like that, where they've been asking for writers and you generally apply. And sometimes you need to write a test article and then they will say to you whether you're successful or not. So I think it's just making sure that if you love a brand or you love a particular pattern company, that you're following them on all of their social media channels, and that you're just aware of anything that comes up where they are inviting people to work with them or collaborate with them, and then putting yourself forward. In terms of having the YouTube channel and it being a lot of work in terms of planning and organising, yes it is, but also for me, I absolutely love it. So I love thinking about different topics that I can talk about on here, and I love planning my videos. I really enjoy editing now actually, which is something I never thought I would say. When I first tried YouTube and I had to edit my first video, I think I actually said to my husband, I'm never gonna enjoy this because it just seemed so difficult to edit the videos. But now that I'm more used to it, I really enjoy trying to make videos aesthetically pleasing and adding music and just making them all nice and pretty and peaceful. Yeah, it's just something that I'm learning about every day and I'm really enjoying doing as well. So yes, it is a lot of work and it is a lot of organising, but it also reaps quite a lot of rewards as well. So I hope that answers that question. The next question is from Nisha BGC, and it is, what motivated you to start vlogging and what keeps you going now? So I think in terms of what motivated me to start vlogging, I think it was just the fact that I felt as though I had so much to say about sewing. I was really inspired by the other vloggers and videos I was watching on YouTube, and I really wanted to be part of that myself. And I've always felt as though I've been a little bit of a loner in a way, in terms of when I was growing up, I felt as though I was the only person my age that was really into knitting and sewing and things like that. None of my friends really were, and I didn't really know anyone else either that was into knitting and sewing other than my family. So I think when Instagram and YouTube became a thing and it opened up this whole wide world of other people that loved sewing and knitting and crafting as much as I do, or I did, it just kind of opened up another world for me, and I felt as though I really wanted to be part of that. I have so much to say about sewing and how happy it makes me and how it's helped me through some really anxious times in my life and things like that. I've talked before briefly about how sewing and crafting has helped me with my mental health, but also I know so many people that it's helped through anxiety and things like that as well. So yeah, that's really what inspired me to start vlogging. I just wanted to talk about sewing really, and I wanted to share what I've made, and if I could inspire anyone else along the way to get into sewing and crafting, and if it made them as happy as it made me, then it would be worth it. I think in terms of what keeps me going now, it's just the sort of sense of community that you get from being part of this sewing world. So I love chatting to people in the comments, I love chatting to people on messages and over on Instagram and things like that. I do feel as though on the whole everyone is really friendly and really encouraging, and it's just such a lovely community to be part of. And I think if you are someone that wants to start your own sewing Instagram or your own sewing YouTube, I would just say just do it. I think if you'd have said to me like 10 or 15 years ago that this is what I would be doing now, I never would have believed you, because at that time I could barely even bring myself to look at myself in a photo, let alone think that I would be talking on video like this or sharing photos of myself in my makes over on Instagram. It just seems a bit crazy now, but what I would say is that Instagram and YouTube has grown my confidence massively actually. And I think if you're someone that wants to give Instagram or YouTube a go, just do it. I think with Instagram especially, I'm going to get on my high horse a little bit now, and I'm kind of straying away from the question, but I'm going to say it anyway. With Instagram, there's a lot of comparison that goes on over there. There's a lot of comparing yourself to other people, and it seems to be something that you just can't help with Instagram. I get it as well, as I know loads of people do. You look at other people's accounts and photos, things that they've made, and you think, oh, they're so much better than me, they make so much more than me, their makes are so much nicer than me, they have so many more followers than me, they get more comments. So Instagram can be like that, but also it can be a really nice place to be, and it can be somewhere where you're really inspired. I get a lot of inspiration from Instagram, so I think you need to be careful with it, but also don't let that put you off of posting your makes either. I think with Instagram and with YouTube, you just kind of need to get over yourself a little bit. So I think with YouTube videos particularly, it took me a long time to get over that thing of hearing your own voice. I think when you come to edit your first YouTube video and you hear your own voice back, it's painful, and you think, oh, who's going to want to listen to me? I sound terrible. And there's also that sense of imposter syndrome as well, where I always thought that people would think, oh, who does she think she is talking about sewing? You know, she's got no formal training or anything like that. What does she think she's doing? And that's imposter syndrome. You feel like you shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be sharing your makes, you don't have the right to, and you shouldn't feel like that. Because if there's one thing that's good about this whole sewing community, is that everyone is different, completely different. So there are a lot of sewing bloggers doing this kind of thing at the moment, and there's a lot of sewing accounts on Instagram. But the beauty of this kind of sewing thing, is that everyone is different and no one is you. And this is what I'm learning really. Everyone has a different take on something. So I could make the same pattern as another sewing blogger and post about it here on YouTube, and both of our takes would be completely different. So I would make it in a completely different way, completely different style. It would fit me and suit me differently to what it would someone else. It might suit me terribly and it might suit them really well. You know, you've got your own thing to give. So if you are someone that wants to start Instagram or wants to start YouTube, just do it, I think, because you get so much back from it. And as I say, it's grown my confidence massively, and I'm really grateful for that. And it's given me so many other opportunities as well, and I'm just really grateful that through YouTube and through Instagram I can now actually call sewing work, and that's always been the dream really. I'll get off my high horse now and stop rambling and move on to the next question. The next question is from Thread Therapy 251, and it says, who's your favourite fashion vlogger? So I don't actually watch many fashion vloggers as such. I watch a lot of crafting channels, I guess. But I think in terms of who inspires me on YouTube and on Instagram, as I've mentioned, Lisa Comfort, I also get a lot of inspiration from Amy Loudon on Taylor S Studios. I love her style. Someone else that I'm really inspired by on Instagram is Kerry Lockwood. So she's a lady who's of a similar age to me and her style is really lovely. She posts mainly about interiors, but she also posts about outfits and things like that as well. Curly Sewista asked, do you have another job, and what did you study/train for at college and uni? So no, I don't have another job now. So I used to, before I had my children, I worked as a PA in a charity. And I worked in that job for almost 10 years. And before that, I worked in other admin jobs, really, as office managers, administration and things like that. And I loved that job. I don't think it was 100% me, because I think I've always been inside someone that needs to be doing something creative like what I'm doing now. So at college, I studied 3 A-levels with no real idea of what I wanted to do. I studied sociology, French and English literature. And then after college, I thought I might want to go into teaching. I had always in the back of my head sort of wanted to do fashion design or something like that, but it just didn't seem to be encouraged, and there didn't seem to be an easy way to get into anything like that. I just assumed that sewing and the things that I did would just be a hobby to go alongside my actual work, so I never really sort of followed that path. I just went into something that I knew I was reasonably good at, which was administration. I kind of fell into that really, and it was always just a job. It was never really something that I wanted to pursue and get better at or get a higher position at or anything like that. And I've always wanted to work for myself and always wanted to be my own boss. I never thought that I would necessarily be able to do that. But there was always something in me that wanted to work for myself, I think. And that's where my business started. So I had my business Poppy and Primrose, which I started just before my children were born. It was around the time where sort of Cath Kidston homeware was all in fashion, and I just sort of looked at that and took inspiration from it and thought I would really like to make homeware and sell it. So I used to make things like carrier bags, peg bags, tea towels and homeware, aprons and things like that. And I had a website which ran alongside my full-time job as a PA at that time, which my husband set up for me. And I used to now and again get orders from that. I don't really know how I got those orders because I never used to promote it or anything, because Instagram and Facebook and those sort of promotional tools weren't really around then. So this website just used to kind of sit there really, and I used to think, oh, I'd love it if that website took off and I could just work for myself and sew all day and sell things and be at home. I've always been a homebody. I've always just wanted to be at home really doing things. So that was my dream. So that website just kind of sat there really and went alongside my job. And then when I left work, my job as a PA when I was pregnant, went on maternity leave and then took voluntary redundancy to be a stay-at-home mum. Didn't work for a while, and then when my children were older I picked up the Poppy and Primrose thing a little bit more when there were more options available in terms of promotion, so Facebook, Etsy, eventually Amazon as well. I used to sell by all of those means, and I just used to do it really when my children were at nursery or in bed. And make it work like that. And it never replaced my full-time salary, but it was a bit of extra money that we could have coming in, and I felt as though I was contributing, and also I really enjoyed it as well. So that's my kind of work history. And Etsy is different now, and I've kind of stopped my Etsy shop and now I'm picking up more of the freelance stuff that I'm doing now in terms of writing and video creating and YouTube, which is brilliant and I'm loving it. So I've got a little knitting section here because there are a few questions about knitting, and this question's from Create Something Pretty, and it says, what was your first knitting project and how old were you when you started knitting? So knitting, I think, has actually been around for me longer than sewing has. I think I started to knit probably when I was around 10. I can't remember what my first knitting project was, but I used to get this book from the library and it had lots of patterns in it for sort of little stuffed animals, and they were really easy to knit, and I used to knit those quite a lot. But I just remember starting to knit and watching my mum knit as well, and watching my grandparents knit, and always wanting to knit clothes. So I learned at a really young age and kind of struggled my way through it really. Lots of drop stitches, lots of messed up knitting projects, but a lot of practice went into it, and then eventually I learned stitches well enough to be knitting garments by around the time that I was a teenager. So I briefly touched on this, but through my teenage years at school there were a couple of years there where I suffered really badly with anxiety and with a phobia, and I can't tell you how much knitting helped me through those times. And it seems crazy to say, but I think if you know, you know. So knitting might have helped you in this way as well, but just knowing that I had that to focus on when I got home in the evenings. Was probably quite a recluse at that time actually. Used to get through the school day, come home and knit. But it really did help me, and I think there's just something about having your hands busy that really calms your mind. So yeah, that was knitting for me really. I can't remember what my first knitting project was, but I did knit a few garments when I was a teenager. I really remember a royal blue chunky cardigan. I remember knitting that so clearly, and I'd love to know what happened to it and where it is now. It's probably been given away long ago. But yeah, I really remember knitting that. I don't think I used to wear my garments very much actually, because I was very quiet about, I didn't used to like telling people that I knit really, and I never would have worn something that I'd knitted, but it was just the process of doing it that really helped me. And then another question about knitting from Amy Brody 3355. Hi Sally, I'd love to know more about how you started knitting. Any tips you have for people trying to learn? I don't know anyone who knits to show me what to do, or rather how to fix things. Thank you so much, looking forward to the video. So yeah, I think it's really hard if you don't have anyone to show you. So I was really lucky that my mum and my grandparents knew how to knit, and I always had them to help me if I ever did make any mistakes and needed to fix anything or to show me how to knit at all. But I do think there are a lot of helpful YouTube videos out there. So someone that I tend to refer to quite a lot is a channel called Very Pink Knits. And I think a lot of you probably already watch her because it's been recommended back to me a few times actually. She has got a knitting video for every type of knitting technique there is, I'm sure. It's such a thorough channel. But yeah, it's really hard to knit just by watching a video. I think if you kind of know how to knit anyway, it's okay to watch a video and kind of see what you're doing. But if you're starting from scratch, it probably is quite hard to learn. So I'm not really sure. I don't know if there's anywhere around that could help you. I know in our local library there's a few knit and natter meetings there. So I don't know if it would be worth going along to something like that and just taking your knitting or asking people to help you, because I think people, what I found generally anyway, is that crafty people are quite keen to help other crafty people. So I'm sure if you went along to one of those groups, maybe someone would be able to help you if you have something similar in your own town. Other than that, yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? I wish there were more crafty courses around. I'm not sure if there are any knitting courses, but if anyone does know of anything, I'd love to know in the comments, as I'm sure everyone else would. So Anya Jaxie has asked, how about a crochet for beginners tutorial? I love your blanket you made, I'd really like to learn. So I don't really feel as though I'm kind of qualified to teach anyone how to crochet. It's something that I've always struggled with a little bit actually, and it's only been recently that I've got into it more. So my blanket that this lady's referring to, I think, is made from treble crochets, and it's just done backwards and forwards, and it's really simple and really easy. But I don't think I crochet myself in the most easy way. I tend to drop and pick up. If anyone was to teach me how to do it, I think they would teach me in the way that you wind all the yarn around your fingers, and then you keep it in your hand all the time, and you're kind of grabbing the yarn as you go. So again, I would say maybe look at another YouTube tutorial. I know when I was learning origami crochet toys, I found the Toft YouTube channel really, really helpful. Really clear tutorials, and it helped me so much. And I think she does have some videos on there about how to make blankets and things, so definitely have a look at the Toft crochet channel. So on to fabric, and Natasha Hawtrey 8670 says, what do you do with all your scraps? And I thought this was a really good question because I struggle so much with what to do with my scraps. So I don't have a sewing room, and I don't have a lot of storage generally in our house to keep anything. I keep my fabric obviously, and I have fabric storage, but then when you get loads of scraps, I've got a full up closet core patterns poof thing, which is absolutely full to the brim of scraps. I've got another basket full of scraps, and a big bag full actually, which I'm not quite sure what to do with. But what I have done in the past is actually fill up a bag and then put it on Facebook Marketplace. And in the past, I have had people really gratefully take those scraps for sewing practice and for kids' craft books and things like that. And I just put it on there and say it's free to a good home, and then someone will usually take it. But I do have a bag on there at the moment that actually hasn't been taken yet. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've also found out recently that H&M take fabric bags back, and I'm not sure if they take scraps or if it's just old clothing. I really need to give them a ring actually and find out what it is, because that would be amazing. So I think H&M take fabric, and then in return for your donation they'll give you a £5 voucher to spend in H&M. So that's something I need to look into, but yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Other suggestions that people have given me before are to make patchwork quilts, to cut the scraps up really finely and use them for toy stuffing, which is a really good idea as well. Or again, make another closet core poof and have poofs all over your house instead of scraps. I don't know, I struggle a little bit with that sometimes, because yes, you're using your scraps, but you're still bringing more stuff into your house. And if you're someone like me that doesn't like a lot of stuff, then you've still got to deal with the stuff. So in a way, I'd rather just kind of give it to someone that can use it. But that's just me. Again, if you've got any suggestions, let me know in the comments. Next question from the same person actually is, where do you usually get your fabric from? I have to say, generally my go-to fabric place is Minerva, and that is because they tend to have absolutely everything I need, and I am fairly loyal to them because I am a craft club member and I know that I will always get 10% off of everything I buy. So generally I am pretty loyal to Minerva. It is where I get a lot of my fabric from. Can you hear that my voice is going because I've talked so much? It's just gone really dark outside as well. I think it's going to rain. Have some tea, that might help. Another couple of places that I love for fabric are Abercon Fabrics. They have some really good quality viscoses on there that are really reasonably priced. I love Stop and Still as well, or self-made. I always call them Stop and Still, but they are self-made now. They have some amazing viscoses on there and also cotton jerseys, and I love their prints. I haven't used them for quite a while now actually. I think if you're going to use them you need to be a little bit more organised because they do take a little while to come. It depends where you are obviously, but for me they tend to take a good week or so to arrive, so you have to be much more organised if you're going to buy from them. But they do have some wonderful fabrics on there. I also love Fabric Godmother actually. I've got a couple of really lovely fabrics from them recently, and they have a lot of their own designs as well, which is really nice. Oh, Sew Me Sunshine as well. They always have some really lovely fabrics there too. I do tend to stick to my favourites actually. I know that I need to branch out a little bit more actually and try other fabric shops too. But yeah, they're generally my go-tos. Then I had a couple of questions about using viscose. So one from Marion Kelly and one from Christy Campbell. And they're both about sewing with viscose. So one says, I know you often sew with viscose. Can you tell me the settings you use on your overlocker to finish your edges? And then one asking to talk about the different types of fabrics that I've used, viscose fabrics, how to tell the stability when you're ordering, and what needles I use for viscose as well. So I think it's quite hard to tell really, because every overlocker is different in terms of how to set your overlocker up for viscose. So I think with viscose I set my stitch length on something like a 1 or a 1.5, and then the differential feed thing to quite a low number as well. And that generally tends to feed through viscose quite well. I think in terms of the settings though, it's something that you just need to fiddle around with, but I think if you are fiddling around with your overlocker, just change one thing at a time rather than changing loads at once, because then you don't know what you've changed that's made it better, if that makes sense. So fiddle around with each tension knob on each thread spool and just see if that makes a difference. If you're finding that it's looping too much or it looks really loopy, it's probably because you haven't got your stitch tension set tight enough, so just make that a little bit tighter. I think it's all just trial and error really, but for viscose you need it all set on something quite tight, so I think go for the higher numbers on all of your thread spools and then go for the lower numbers on your stitch length and your differential feed setting, because that will give you a smaller stitch and a tighter feed. I hope that makes sense. In terms of buying viscose online, it's really difficult, isn't it? I think in terms of the stability of viscose, I think there are different types of viscoses. So you can get viscose challis, viscose or rayon challis, which means that it's really sort of drapey, really smooth and really lovely to wear. It can be a little bit more fiddly to cut out though, I think. You can also get a viscose twill, which means that there is a twill weave running through the fabric and that gives it a little bit more weight, but then because of the twill in your viscose it can be a little bit more difficult to cut out. I think it's really hard to buy viscose online, and I think the only way you can really test it out is to ask for a sample of the fabric, which is a pain to do, I know, and it does take longer, but Minerva, I know, offer a sample service. I think you pay just £1 and they will send you a swatch of that fabric and you can see if it's suitable for you. In terms of what needles to use for viscose, I think the best ones to use are the Microtex needles. I think that's right, I'll list them below, I'll put a picture in here. And I tend to use a really fine needle, so I tend to use like a 60 or a 70 point number needle, because that's a really fine point and it will pierce through your fabric really easily. So I hope that helps a little bit. Liz Carr has asked about overlocking thread and where to buy the best overlocker thread. I have to say I buy most of mine from Amazon actually, but I know that Minerva do sell some. I found that on Amazon you can buy the 4 lots in one pack for a reasonable price, but it's actually worked fine on my overlocker so far, and it's just a sort of polyester blend thread. Yeah, I would recommend the ones that I've bought from Amazon before, and I'll link them below if you want to try them out for yourself. The next few questions were all about style and things like that and how I approach my sewing. So the first question was from Louise Campbell. And it says, how have you developed your style and colours for your skin and hair? Are there any designers, influencers or high street fashion brands that help you recreate a garment? So in terms of developing your own style, I think that has definitely been a journey. But one thing I think has helped me so much with finding my own style and knowing what suits me is actually doing these videos on YouTube. Because I think watching yourself back and seeing what you're wearing and seeing how it suits you or doesn't suit you has helped me massively. And I think if that's something you're struggling with, maybe just take photos of yourself just for yourself and see how you feel you look in those colours. And if you're going to buy a fabric, maybe hold it up to you if you've got the physical, like the actual fabric, hold it up to you, take a photo or ask someone if they think it suits you as well. Yeah, I just think it's a journey. And in terms of style, I think, as I've mentioned, I really love vintage style and I love anything really that has a nod to vintage, but nonetheless, I really think it works well to plan and make for the kind of lifestyle, the kind of season you're in is what I keep hearing lately on podcasts and things like that. This season of your life, so whatever season of your life you are in, whether it's going to an office every day, working at home like me, being at home with your little children, you really need to think about what works day to day for you in your wardrobe. What you like to wear mostly and what you feel comfortable in. I've been asked quite a lot recently if I've had my colours done, but no, I haven't. I would love to actually do that. I've read a little bit about this, about going to a colour consultant where they tell you what colours suit you and the kind of clothing, colours and things that you should be wearing. I would think that would be so interesting to do and I'd love to have it done. Mainly just to see if the kind of colours that I do like on myself are actually what they think suits me too. That would be really interesting to know. They might tell me that actually I should be wearing bright orange all the time. But yeah, it would be really interesting to go and have that done, I think. But no, I haven't actually had that done yet. In terms of designers and influencers and high street brands, I don't really have anything in particular. I do have a lot of adverts come up on Instagram actually for high street shops, and I think they come up so much on my feed because I tend to click on them a lot, but not because I'm wanting to buy them, but because they might have inspired me to try and sew something. So what I do with Instagram or Pinterest or anything else is that I tend to save things that I've seen from the high street that I might want to recreate for myself one day, and I just have a folder or whatever it is on Instagram where you can save things, save photos that you've seen, and I keep them there just to refer back to if there is anything that I want to sew in the future. I am always attracted to anything that has a vintage sort of twist on it, which is why I loved the NYX dress recently for its kind of 70s style, or the nod to the 70s. I really love that, and anything that's 40s and 50s inspired I really love as well. I can't say I do follow a lot of influencers actually online in terms of fashion, which is weird actually. Let me know in the comments if you follow anyone sort of influencer wise that you think might be interesting to me, because I don't have many actually. I tend to be much more inspired by other things that I see, like, as I say, high street, and sometimes telly as well can be quite inspirational. There was an amazing programme actually that was on last year called The Serpent, and it wasn't a very nice programme actually. It was about murder or a mass murderer actually, but it had Jenna Coleman in it and it was set in the 70s, and she had the most amazing 70s wardrobe, and I just loved watching that just to see everything that she wore. So things like that sometimes inspire me as well. So Elizabeth J 784 says, how do you find patterns for petite people? I'm the same height as you, or do you just generally alter the pattern? So yeah, I just generally have to alter the pattern. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I don't feel as though there are many petite pattern brands out there, which is such a shame. Maybe we need to start one up. But in terms of size inclusivity, is that the right word? Inclusivity? My brain's going now. You know what I mean? In terms of like size inclusiveness, there aren't a lot of pattern brands for petite people, I think. So yeah, generally I tend to alter everything. It's just become the thing now that I always go to the finished garment length, or I look at what height the pattern has been drafted for. Generally it seems to be 5'7" is the average height the patterns will draft for. So I'm 5'3". So I tend to know really that I'm going to have to shorten a pattern by around 3 or 4 inches before I even start. It is a pain actually, and I wish there were more petite pattern brands, but unfortunately I think there aren't at the moment. So yeah, generally it's just altering everything that I come to make. Kiwi CSO says, I'm wondering if you have a specific creative process, what inspires your makes, and so on. I've kind of touched on that already a bit, I guess, but no, I don't have a creative process. I tend to just get an idea on a whim and go with that. So it might be something that I've seen on the high street that I think I can use other patterns to hack together or mash together to recreate something similar. And then I would just go ahead and find the patterns that I've already got and have a go at mashing them together. I do wish that I was one of these people actually that would sit down and do a lovely drawing of what I want to make and the fabrics and things like that, and then create it that way. But I'm just not really artistic in that way. I'm much more of a kind of on a whim. And actually I think some of my best makes have actually been made just on that kind of whim, where I've seen something and just thought I really want to try and recreate that, and using patterns that I've already got, I've just kind of pieced things together, or you know, made something similar based on patterns that I've already got, and I love doing that. I haven't done that for a while actually, but yeah, it's really fun to do that. So yeah, I think it's just about being inspired by something that I've seen and thinking about how I can use what I've already got to make that. This is the last question that Stitch and Pearl says, is there a craft you would love to learn but haven't tried yet? I don't think there really is at the moment actually. I would have said crochet a couple of years ago, but I do feel as though I'm really coming along quite well with that, which is really good, and I'm so pleased that I've persevered with that. There are other crafts that have caught my eye, so needle punching is one that I'd really like to get better at. I have started a needle punch kit, but I haven't finished it yet, so I'd really like to get better at that. But I feel like with sewing, knitting and crochet, I've really got enough to be going on with really. So no, not at the moment. There isn't really anything else that I want to try. But there might be something that takes my eye in the future, you never know. Oh my goodness, my voice is going now. I've talked so much in this video. I really hope I haven't waffled too much. I've tried to be as concise as I can, but I also wanted to get quite a lot in as well. So I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you so much if you did send me a question. I'm really grateful. And as always, thank you so much for your support for my channel. Thank you again if you have subscribed and if you do watch my videos regularly. With that said, if you are watching this and you haven't already subscribed, I'd love you to consider subscribing. I do post regularly every week, mainly on a Sunday at 8 AM, and I'd love to have you as part of my channel community. I'm going to stop talking now and go and do something else. Take care everyone, thank you so much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!